Ozzi Warwick every Monday from 1:30 p.m. Take a stand for TNT on the most influential name in radio, I-95.5 FM.
And good afternoon, Trinidad and Tobago. Good afternoon, Kern. All right. Well, Kern is joining us this afternoon. And I have a few things to say. First of all, let me apologize for last week. I wasn't here last week, but that is because a lot of preparations into our very successful march that we had on Friday. And so let me just start off by saying that indeed we had an amazingly powerful march and demonstration on Friday, the 4th of August. And I want to thank all our members, the thousands of workers that came out on Friday. And let me just say that many of them couldn't. It was a sacrifice, because there were threats by the ECA. There were threats even by the state companies, by the workplaces. And workers showed defiance, because they understood the seriousness of what this is about. And they really remind me of the civil rights movement and the freedom fighters. So to all those thousands of workers who came out in the blazing sun, Kern, and that sun was not easy on Friday. But the weather was perfect for that powerful march. I would like to also thank all the unions. We had almost 20 trade unions participating in the march. All three federations, NATOC, FITON, and of course JTOM, participated in this powerful show of force. I would like to thank the international federations, because there was solidarity greetings coming from Industrial Global Union, as well as from the World Federation of Trade Union. These bodies representing, in the case of industrial, some 50 million workers. In the case of WFTU, some 90 million workers across 140 countries. And of course, coming from the Barbados trade union movement, also sending solidarity. I'd like to thank members of the public. There were members of the public that came out on march, including PNM activists. Yes, and I want to thank them for coming out, because it showed a certain level of courage, and to say when wrong is wrong, wrong is wrong. And so I want to thank them. They know who they are, who marched with us, and of course members of the media who covered the entire event from start to finish. So all of these actors playing a crucial role in making Friday a huge success. But again, I really want to thank the warrior workers who made the sacrifice and came out on Friday. And it shows that we are still ready. There are people, Kurt, in this country who are ready to take a stand for Trinidad and Tobago. We have always made the point that the public display of dissatisfaction is a fundamental human right. Can you imagine for a moment if the freedom fighters around the world did not engage in mass action, whether it's from the struggle against apartheid to the civil rights movement, the struggle against colonialism, to right now the struggle currently across the world. There's a huge struggle against austerity and neoliberalism. Whichever moment it is, you see that there are people taking a stand in order to advance the interests of justice and fairness. And right here in Trinidad and Tobago, well, just 2 weeks ago in Barbados, we saw people taking a stand. Well, right here in Trinidad and Tobago, I'm proud to say that we had thousands of people who took a stand. Now, I want to get straight in terms of my installation this afternoon to deal with one businessman / activist. And I want to deal with that a little bit, because there's some fundamental issues that I do not want us to be distracted from. And now the thing is, I know Gary fairly well as an activist. But I have to say make something very clear. The issue of the 1% has nothing to do with racism, Gary. It has everything to do with elitism. And elitism is this belief that a society or a system should be led by an elite. And this elite exerts power and influence over that society and the system. That is the real issue at hand. That we have a small body that is exerting extreme influence over the way our society is developing. And this is where the issue has to be. And the fact of the matter is that this elite became or have amassed its wealth, guess how? Through or on the backs and shoulders, through blood, sweat and tears of ordinary working people. You see, what is being attempted here is an attempt to shift the narrative away from the real issue of how our society is structured, to shift the issue somehow into some strange realm about race and that and so on. No, it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the fact that we have a powerful elite that is exerting influence over our country. And that powerful elite could, Trinidad and Tobago, they finance political parties, which is why, and when they do that, they exert influence over those political parties, and therefore has a say in terms of how the country and how public policy is formulated. It's also, and we cannot ignore this fact, I think this is one of the points as well, is that we cannot pretend that the elites do not benefit from government contracts. They do. All right? And so this attack on ordinary working people, whether it's CPEP workers, URP workers, or the social programs that sought to provide for the poor and the vulnerable, we attack those and we make all sort of disparaging remarks about them, and guess what? You have the elites who also benefit from the state. Now, we cannot forget that it was they themselves who said they are 1% and are the most powerful. We did not say that. That was a self-confession. And if you have a person, after boasting about or boasting of the power that they have over society, and then speaks about the 120 businesses that they own, and the trade unions call for a boycott on that basis, you tell me, what does that have to do with race? Nothing. It has to do, in effect, with elitism and the class structure of our society. And we cannot forget the class structure of Trinidad and Tobago. A class structure which, in fact, has remained fairly intact for the last, well, even since the since colonial times. We also want to talk about the success, the so-called success, and about punishing for success. This is not about punishing for success. It is a case of respecting the ordinary workers who have helped build their empire by working for them and buying their goods and services. That's what it is. It is, it was so strange. I read his response, and what caught my attention is he's talking about punishing for success and the success, and at no point did he acknowledge the role and contribution of ordinary workers in building their empire, in contributing to their success. In fact, it was so sad that he would say that, especially after a few days when it was ordinary working people in the hot blazing sun waiting to go in to the establishment to take advantage of a sale. Traffic on the highway, people could hardly get into Port of Spain to buy your goods and services. It was ordinary people who did that. And now you want to pretend that ordinary working people has made no contribution to the success of these business elites. And that is the issue. That disregard and disrespect. And we cannot continue with that disregard and disrespect. What is interesting is that this attempt to try and turn elites now into victims. So somehow they are the victims. They are the ones who, and when you read it, you almost like you're starting to feel sorry for them, Like they are the victims and so on. But I have that will not work. And you know why that attempt to turn the elites into victims will not work? Because the workers of those establishments know only too well the level of indignity, disrespect, and exploitation that they have to endure on a daily basis working in those establishments. That is at the heart of it. So why we cannot speak about that? Why we can't open our mouths and challenge the elites and say, hey, wait a minute. First of all, you're not prepared to share the burden of adjustment, which is what we've been calling for. To say, listen, in this economic period, it's not about taking advantage of this situation to send home workers, taking advantage of this situation, and well, you're having sale left, right, and center, so you maintain your profit margins at all costs, making no sacrifice. No, we're saying that, hey, all of us in this boat together. And therefore, if we want to come out of this crisis, then we have to do it together, and everyone has to play a part in making the sacrifice. And it cannot be only workers that make that sacrifice. But we can't say that. We shouldn't say that. In fact, it's almost as though we should stay silent. And what amazed me is that you have people, I mean, I've listened to the airways over the last 24 hours, 48 hours. And well, don't talk about social media. And it amazed me. It is almost as though we must continue to pretend that this is not the class structure of our society, or even worse, accept it. And therefore, we as workers, as the majority, cannot say, well, wait, we are not powerless. We cannot be held to be the only sacrificial lambs in this current situation. In fact, we have power. And people miss that point. It was about how can we as the working class exert our own power and not have someone on some international television interview talk about being the most powerful. But that we ordinary working people also can be powerful. And that was what was being presented. You see, this is about how the elites also think about us, you know. You see, sometimes we don't really spend time and rock back and contemplate a little bit. Can you imagine what it has been saying about us in their circles? I mean, it's when you really think and imagine, they really just see us as beasts of burden, and that they can also come out again, not even understanding, not even taking the time, a little time, just to say, wait now, my success has to do with these ordinary working people, you know. They work hard to help me make my profit. They buy my goods. Hey, look at here. Mad rush. Look at the papers. Mad rush. We rushing to buy your goods and services. So where is the respect? Where is the respect for that? Completely ignore that. You see, it is about awakening our class consciousness, and in that, and people fear that, you know, Kern. Trinidad and Tobago, what we are seeing in these responses is really fair. They do not want us to. They do not want our class consciousness to become awakened. We must continue to be asleep so that we can continue to be exploited. Where you have women being sent home because they're pregnant, no respect for the Maternity Act, where you can't take vacation. If you get sick, you have fever, you're still forcing yourself to go to work. Why? Because if you stay home, you would not be paid, and you still have to find food to put on the table. You have to get up 4, 5 o'clock in the morning to face the traffic to reach to work. And when you reach to work, if you reach to work 5 minutes late because somebody can't shut down the highway and cause it to pile up, you're being ridiculed. Then you have to, after work now, you have to face another 2 hours of traffic just to get back home. And by the time you reach home, it's 7 o'clock. Then you have to make sure you could put some food on the table for the kids. Who caring about these things? Who? Not the elites, but those things is what can help us raise our consciousness. And I want to now talk about this thing. I don't know since when he became an expert on Petrotrin. But let's be clear about Petrotrin. Petrotrin has contributed, coming out of the TTEITI report, between 2011 and 2015 or so, some $15 to $16 billion to the government coffers, to the treasury, to help with education, healthcare, to help with infrastructure, road development. That is a contribution. To suggest that because of the current fall in commodity prices recently, that all of a sudden Petrotrin is just burden to the state, that is incorrect, inaccurate information. And he's repeating what I heard some other commentators who are making these comments in order to advance their own class interests, because this is what it is going to boil down to, understanding our class interest. All right? Because the elite is clearly advancing their class interests, and you see how far they're willing to go to defend their class interests, to make wild accusations, to make inaccurate statements in the media, just to defend their class interests. Just to defend their class interests. So we needed to correct that information in terms of Petrotrin. Now, corruption. Well, Kern, I really wonder. See, we can't have short-term memory. If we have short-term memory, the elites will continue they will continue their exploitation of us, and the surplus value of our labor. They'll continue to exploit that, and we will not respond accordingly. How many businesses closed their business on December 5th, 2014, in solidarity with the rest of us when we marched against corruption? I don't remember any of those any of the business community saying, listen, the trade union movement is taking a stand against corruption. In solidarity with them, we are going to close our business to send a message to the government with regards to corruption. We have been the ones talking about political interference in the operations of state enterprises. We have been the ones talking about the mismanagement of state enterprises. Where were the business community when we were speaking out on these issues? Where were they? They stood by in silence because they were benefiting from the state. Yeah. I say that without apology and without fear of condemnation. We have to be more astute in how we understand how our society works. We also have to be careful that we do not get caught up in the attempt to distract us from what clearly is in what's supposed to be rather in our interest, and how we can advance our class interest. We can no longer sit idly by or sit quietly, because sitting idly by or sitting quietly will allow tyranny to rule. And tyranny is not necessarily a one-person dictatorship. Tyranny can also come from what we call an elite dictatorship, hiding, of course, behind politicians. Please excuse me. The march on Friday was a success because the country is in trouble. And the country is in trouble because those who we have given the authority to govern, to rule, seem to be bending more towards party financiers and not towards the people. We presented Labour's economic alternative plan, Kern. We came up with an alternative. We said, listen, in other countries that are facing this economic crisis, there are two paths. You can either choose austerity, as in some countries like Greece and Italy and so on, or you can choose another path, which is what you call public investment. This is where you invest in you use a percentage of your GDP to stimulate the economy so you can grow out of the crisis. This is what we presented. And that has been ignored completely. So you ignore our alternative and our proposal. And as you ignore that, you retrench in thousands of workers, And as you retrench thousands of workers, and we take a stand against that, you're telling us, come back to the tripartite advisory council. To talk about what? Whilst you continue to send thousands of workers home, whilst you continue to implement austerity, whilst you continue to implement IMF World Bank policies. I wonder if persons pay careful attention to the IMF report about they're already starting to stipulate some what you call adjustments. We went through this before, and the social impact that had on our society, it shredded our communities and our society apart to the point where we have, in effect, a completely broken system. What I realized persons also did not pay close attention to, and as I come to a close, because I see that the 2 o'clock news update is here, is the question of our system of governance. A system of governance that is not designed to protect ordinary working people. It was designed to protect the elites. It was designed to protect those who are the wealthy. And it's designed to protect them against us. So, what other option would we have in a case where you have a system of governance that is designed against your interest? Is to change that system of governance. And no Gary Aboud or no 1% or Sabga Aboud or any one of them will detract us or try to distract us from our journey to improve the system of governance in Trinidad and Tobago. That journey to improve and to change our system of governance is what is required in order to bring about economic and social justice for all of us. Not just a few, not just a handful, but for all of us. So I wish to thank Trinidad and Tobago for this segment. You can also follow on Twitter. Take a Stand for TT is also on Twitter, so you can follow us on Twitter. And I hope everyone has a good afternoon, and I really hope that the listening audience can take a little time to contemplate and to reflect on these words this afternoon as we look at our society, look at how it's shaped, look at the class structure, and take a stand to change that, to reshape Trinidad and Tobago to the benefit of all of us. Thank you and good afternoon.